It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at AmericasVoiceNow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I am your host this morning. Appreciate you joining with us. You know, as I capture our real-time statistics, I can see folks coming in from all over the country. I'm grateful and appreciative that you join with us every morning. Thank you so much. We're going to tackle 4 or 5 different topics this morning. Because there is a ton, a plethora of new information and news that is out there. And, you know, part of our goal is to educate you and inform you about what's really going on, and then to put it into a perspective that the critical thinker can really grasp and understand the meaning of what you're reading and seeing and hearing and learning. It's more than important that you understand what's really happening, because what you're seeing in the press and in the media, you know, I give you links and stories and things on our Facebook, our website, and on our YouTube pages, but it's important that you not only gather that information, but that you fully understand it for what it really is. And the reason I say that is because the media doesn't really give you the whole story. They may give you the headline. They may expand on the headline. They may expound on the story a little bit. But they never really tell you the true implications of some of these issues. And that's where they fail. So we're going to talk about a number of things this morning, including the new news that Saudi Arabia has cut ties with the United States. And the reason that that's important, and most people will say, well, why would you care? I'm going to tell you why I care. And you're going to care at the end of this segment. It matters because we have a thing and an agreement with the Saudis called the PetroDollar. And I'm going to explain to you what that is and how it works, and so you'll fully understand the implications of an end of diplomatic ties with Saudi Arabia and what that means as a declining relationship expands, first and foremost. Secondly, in our next segment, we're going to try a new format here and try to go through a group of news stories. The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, the current news is got so much information out there that I want to share with you, and I can't because I don't have the time. Even in a 2-hour show, I don't have the time to share with you and get in depth on those things that really matter. So what I'm going to try to do is to create a new segment called, Fast News. Basically, what I want to do is to try to run over a group of stories and tackle them, address them quickly, and hit them, and then talk a little bit about the implications of those stories or what they mean to us as a society, or interpret them in some way that makes sense other than just the splash headline that you normally get from the Ministry of Propaganda. I'm sorry, the mainstream media. The third topic we're going to tackle this morning is a new book by a guy named Peter Schweitzer. Now, Schweitzer has written this book called Extortion, and I watched an interview with him the other day, and the book is now being reviewed. Sarah Palin just came out with a review of it, and they featured a segment on 60 Minutes the other day with him. I got to tell you, this book can very well be, not only is it damning about what's really happening in Congress and how they have completely and utterly betrayed us, but it gives you the empirical proof that you need to understand the depth of that deprivation, number one. And number two, it also gives you the names and the facts and the figures and how it's done and where it's done. It is almost an indictment, and I mean that in a true legal criminal sense, of what's happening in Congress today. The implications of some of the things that are going on, Eric Holder and the DOJ, where they are literally accepting campaign donations to ignore prosecutions and utilizing the threat of prosecution if you don't pay up is gangland gangsterism from Chicago School of Politics, but writ large and in a way that you will not be able to believe. It's almost like the plot of a book, a fiction book. Let me clarify that. Our fourth segment is we're going to talk about one area that everybody else in the media seems to fail to discuss. They're all talking about Obamacare. Everybody, every news channel is talking about it. Every radio station's talking about it. Every show host is talking about it. The one thing they're not talking about is all of these people that are being canceled off of the insurance policies. You know, yesterday, Florida announced their largest insurer announced they're cutting 80% of their plans. That's 300,000 plans. And so when we're looking at the total number of plans that are being cut, the real question becomes what's going to happen with these people on January 1st? And what I want to talk about is the implications of the people who have had their insurance canceled and yet cannot sign up for Obamacare, either because the website doesn't work or because the costs are so exorbitant that they can't handle it. And here's what's going to happen. I'm going to save this for the meat of this for the segment, but what's really ultimately going to happen is people who have chronic illnesses and long-term illness and have existing doctors and existing medical procedures that are currently in place and have scheduled surgeries and all of these things that nobody's thinking about the minutia, these people are suddenly going to find themselves on the outside looking in. They're going to have to cancel surgeries. How are they going to get the medications for their chronic illnesses? How are they going to, when they can't see the existing doctor they have because they no longer have health insurance, or the health insurance that they can maybe obtain between now and January 1st comes from Obamacare and that doctor is no longer available? What's going to happen to these people? What I can tell you is this. By the way, I'm watching live here as people come on board. This is amazing. I mean, people are pouring in from all over the country. I see folks in here from Chicago. I see folks in here from Beckett Ridge. I'm not even sure where that is, but it looks like it's somewhere out in Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania or Ohio. St. Louis, here in West Plains. Ada, I think that's Oklahoma. Anyway, the point is, my point is this. These people who are going to have no health insurance come January 1st. In other words, they've been canceled. They can't sign up for the new policy, and so they are suddenly left bereft and afloat in a sea of no insurance with existing healthcare situations that require. I mean, what are you going to do with people who are actually in the hospital right now, or will be on January 1st? You know, they got in on December 20th. Their health care policy was canceled the day that, is going to be canceled in 2 or 3 days, and they're in the hospital. Now what? What's going to happen to them? Let the lawsuits begin. And here's the problem. Our taxpayers are going to be responsible and on the hook for any lawsuits that are successful that are going to literally bankrupt the nation. I'm telling you right now, there is no way that HHS is going to be able to escape some level of responsibility legally and civilly for the loss of insurance for many of these people and the inability for them to re-sign up under a new healthcare provider. Their insurance companies are going to be sued. HHS is going to be sued. We are going to be sued as a nation. And that means that when those losses occur and the government is found guilty and their insurance companies are found guilty, we're going to be on the hook as taxpayers for some of those settlements and judgments that come out of these lawsuits. It's going to be a staggering cost. All right, let's jump onto our first topic because this is a very important one. Saudi Arabia has severed diplomatic ties with the United States over their response to the conflict in Syria and other issues. That's the final straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. But ultimately, excuse me, the problem is that Saudi Arabia is upset about our policies, and not our policies, our president's policies, in relation to Iran and Syria. And other issues too, but those are the two big ones. That's what's causing the rift, if you will. Now, a lot of folks would say on first glance, well, who could care less? Saudi Arabia is no real friend of the United States anyway. Well, I got to tell you something that you may not be aware of, and I want you to do some looking at the concepts that are involved with international and diplomatic associations like the United States and the diplomatic ties that we have with Saudi Arabia. I want you to go into a web browser, any web browser, and I want you to type in the term petrodollar. Petro, as in petroleum dollar. What the petrodollar is, and I'm going to sum this up in brief. The petrodollar is an agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia and the OPEC producing countries, which is OPEC stands for oil producing exporting countries. And it's not just Saudi Arabia, by the way. Venezuela is on that list and other countries. But for the most part, they're mostly Middle Eastern. You know, it's Bahrain, it's Oman, it's the UAE, and so forth. These nations have an agreement with the United States that basically says the following. Anyone who buys oil from an OPEC nation must convert their currency into the United States denominated dollar before they can buy. In other words, OPEC will only accept U.S. currency, dollars, for oil purchases. So if you're coming from China, you have to convert yuan to dollars. If you're coming from Russia and you want to buy oil, you've got to convert rubles to dollars. If you're coming from England and you want to buy oil, you've got to convert pounds to dollars, or euros to dollars, or whatever it is, shekels to dollars, I don't care, rials. The point is this. That is one of the things, and it's only one. There are actually two things, but one of the things that props the U.S. dollar up as the de facto currency that is in use around the world. It is the basis of what's called the reserve currency of the world. Now, most people don't understand monetary issues, and I gave you the title of a book the other day to buy or get your hands on somehow, borrow it, get it out of a library if you can. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island, and it's by Griffin. And this particular book will kind of give you some understanding of how the dollar is denominated as the world's currency, but there are plenty of other information sources out there where you can find. My point to you is this. As a critical thinker, you need to do some investigation and homework to understand fully the implications of this. And the reason I say that is because this whole topic is a little bit like the idea of Pericles, where he says, just because you don't think politics, or just because you don't take an interest in politics, doesn't mean politics doesn't take an interest in you. And I say the same thing about banking and world finance. Just because you don't understand money, banking, and finance doesn't mean that money, banking, and finance doesn't take an interest in you. It lives on you. It thrives on you. It eats you. That's what it feeds upon. And so if you are ignorant of how money works, how finance works, how international finance works, how currency and international monetary exchanges and things like that work, you are completely clueless to a major factor and an element that affects your life every single day. And so you don't have to be an expert on it. You don't have to go and get a graduate degree in it. All you've got to do is understand the basic concepts. And I'd strongly encourage you to do that, because as a function of your critical thinking skill set, your job, your job is to gather information and gather enough information to be able to make informed decisions. Then as time moves on and you gain more information, you can modify that positioning and take into account new information that you gather and incorporate that into your opinion, and it will sometimes move your opinion one way or another. But the ultimate point is that your job as a critical thinker is to make sure that you are truly recognizing the implications of issues surrounding you. And the only way that you're going to do that is to go out there and do some homework and learn. I want you to understand what the petrodollar is and the world's reserve currencies are. Those are the two things that are implicit in understanding the importance of Saudi Arabia severing diplomatic ties with the United States. Because if the U.S. dollar is no longer the standard guaranteed denomination that OPEC will accept, the dollar is defunct. I'm telling you right now. It will completely undermine the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. And we already have other nations. There's two angles to this. One is OPEC and the petrodollar. The other side of this is other nations all consider the dollar to be the reserve currency for their nations as well. And there are a group of countries, they're called the BRICS countries, and BRICS. And that stands for Brazil, India, China. Shucks, I just drew a complete blank. Anyway, the point is that these Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Australia, and one other country. I'm just drawing a blank. The point is these BRICS countries are all working towards eliminating the dollar as the U.S. reserve, or the U.S. dollar as their world's reserve currency. They want to utilize a different currency. More than likely, it'll become the yuan, which is China's currency. The impact of that to us as a nation is stunning. If Saudi Arabia and OPEC determine that the petrodollar agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia is no longer a valid or worthwhile agreement to continue, and the BRICS country, first of all, that creates a major problem for the dollar right off the bat. But if the BRICS countries then utilize that as the final step into replacing the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency, it will mean the utter and total collapse of the U.S. dollar. The implications of that are stunning in the sense that, you hear about Wall Street crashes and stuff like that. Man, this will take the entire globe, including starting with the United States, into a worldwide depression, the likes of which we have never seen. Now, I understand the implications that most people will say, I couldn't care less about Saudi Arabia. They're no friend of ours, and we shouldn't really have an agreement with them anyway. I wouldn't even disagree with that, except for the fact that the petrodollar agreement exists. And so we can't ignore the realities of that issue, right? Utilizing Ayn Rand's theory, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of reality. And the petrodollar is an agreement that is existing in reality. So ignoring it or ignoring the implications of that agreement evaporating mean that we have really no alternative but to recognize the implications of it and to look at what will happen and to try to avoid it. Recognize what the petrodollar agreement basically states. And I have to summarize this and analogize it. But basically what it is we've agreed to ensure that the kingdoms in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE, etc., that those nation states, and there's monarchies, and they are monarchies, continue without interruption. In other words, we've agreed that we will back their play. And that is why, as an example, when Saddam Hussein went to invade Kuwait, we went to Kuwait's rescue. Remember now, the original Gulf War, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. We immediately jumped to the fore and said, we're going to go help Kuwait. Why? Because Kuwait is one of the OPEC countries, and that's part of our petrodollar agreement. They guarantee that they will only accept U.S. dollars as long as we guarantee to be their big brother and protector. That's the simple reality of it, ladies and gentlemen. Saudi Arabia, remember, gave us permission to build air forces in Riyadh and other places, these bases, air force bases and deployment zones within Saudi Arabia, right? By the way, that was considered almost sacrilege to the rest of the Muslim world. But Saudi Arabia is really not interested in religious issues. They're more interested in keeping their monarchy alive, so they really couldn't care less. The long and the short of it is this. We went in and saved Kuwait. We protected Saudi Arabia because Saddam was lining up tanks all along the Saudi border, and he was about to invade Saudi Arabia as well. They got nervous. We stepped in. We got Kuwait back for the Kuwaitis. We kicked Saddam out. We made sure that Saudi Arabia wasn't violated and raped and pillaged by Saddam. And ultimately, we met our half of the obligation, right? The other half of the obligation is that they keep the U.S. dollar as their reserve currency, and that's what they utilize that's the only currency they'll accept. By breaking and severing diplomatic ties with the United States, irrespective of whether it's Syria or Iran or any other reason, the point is that petrodollar agreement is in danger. And if the petrodollar agreement collapses, the United States dollar will evaporate overnight. That is the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Everything else is smoke and mirrors and marketing. Because you have to recognize that it's not just U.S. dollars. We import from Saudi Arabia and OPEC about $160 billion in oil. In fact, the numbers are available for you on the website, which is, I've given you many times, but I'm going to give it to you again. It is usdebtclock.org. It kind of gives us an overview of how much money or how much oil we import. And what we import from OPEC is $149 billion a year so far this year. We also import $388 billion from other OPEC countries. But what you have to recognize is this. It's not the 140 or 150 billion we're importing. It's the world who is buying oil from OPEC. In other words, our 150 billion is a drop in the bucket. And of course, ours would be denominated in U.S. dollars. But what about China? What about Russia? What about India? What about Indonesia? What about Europe? Those countries are forced to convert their currencies to U.S. dollars. So if we're buying 150 billion, you can safely assume that the amount of money that is being purchased, or the amount of oil, I should say, that's being purchased, runs into the trillion-plus dollar range for Saudi Arabia and the OPEC countries. If the petrodollar is, and the agreement is eviscerated, then for all intents and purposes, $1 trillion per year that is coming in and being forced to be denominated into U.S. dollars will no longer be denominated there. Now you get the implications here. It is staggering. So this whole issue is coming about as a direct result of the fact that Saudi Arabia is unhappy with the United States on our stance on both Syria and Iran. What that tells you is that they are putting the pressure on us, and this is where a lot of the pressure came for us to get involved in Syria in the first place. And this is where a lot of the pressure is coming for the United States to get involved in blocking Iran from getting a nuclear weapon and becoming a threat to Saudi, because the Saudis and the Iranians do not like each other at all. So the upshot is, if we do not kowtow and capitulate to Saudi demands, they are using the petrodollar as a threat. The agreement of the petrodollar as a threat. It is a dangerous, dangerous time for us. How this will play out, I don't know. My crystal ball is broken, but I can tell you this. This is an area for you to keep your eye on and watch. Because, and this is something that the media will not be talking to you about. The Ministry of Propaganda doesn't even want to alert you to the fact that there is a petrodollar agreement. That's why you've never even heard the phrase before. I mean, why would something so big, so important, so implicit into our national economy and international standing in the world be a phrase you've never even heard before? Because no one wants you to recognize just exactly how tied into the OPEC producing nations we are, and how thin the thread that holds the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. I want you to do some homework and evaluate and understand the implications of this. You really need to understand world reserve currency and the implications of the petrodollar. Do your own homework. Don't take my word for it. Part of being a critical thinker is evaluating things outside of your own biases, your own beliefs, or your own failing or lack of knowledge. Getting the information together so that you can make informed decisions, and then understanding and formulating an opinion and a position. That's your job. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to hit some fast news because we are inundated in a deluge, if you will, of information that is pouring out to the American public. It's like trying to drink out of a fire hose, folks. There's so much data out here about what's going on so many different fronts and so many different elements and angles. It's hard for me to even keep up with this. How I can share all of that with you is only by racing through it. And I'm going to try to do this fast news segment and cut across a whole area or a whole scope of different things. All right, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to America's Voice Now. When we return, we're going to talk more about this aspect of it. By the way, I'm hoping, I've been working to try to get James Wesley Rawls on with us today. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get him on this morning or not, but I am working diligently to try to have him on here. He is the author of an outstanding book, which I strongly encourage you to get. It's called Patriots. It's a novel of survival in the coming collapse. And he's also the author and the purveyor of survivalblog.com. If you've never heard of Mr. Rawls, you really need to. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. You can find us at AmericasVoiceNow.org. You can find us at Facebook.com/AmericasVoiceNow. And you can find us also at YouTube.com/AmericasVoiceNow. We'll be right back.